I'm going to return a monster like you. Ha ha ha.
My husband coldly said that to me, a person who has suffered severe burns on my face. He narrowed his eyes and twisted his lips. He snorted with laughter, and it was clear he was mocking me. However, the cause of my burns was my husband. We got into an argument, and in his irritation, he pushed me hard. I lost my balance and ended up plunging headfirst into the stove. That was what happened.
It's your own carelessness. What, are you saying I did? There's no way it's my fault.
He kept insisting he was not to blame. He never once apologized or showed concern. To make matters worse, he hurled terrible insults at me and even presented me with divorce papers. Exhausted by the unreasonable treatment and verbal abuse, I decided to take those papers and go back to my parents' house. I explained everything to my welcoming parents, including how I got the burns and what my husband has said to me. My dad's vein on his forehead was about to explode, and my mom's usually calm face turned into a scary look. It was clear they were angry for me. Then my father said,
Shall we make him regret this?
He's on a mission to get back at my husband. My name is Cindy. I'm 32 years old. I'm currently single, living at my parents' house and working from home. However, I'm a divorcee. A year ago, I divorced my former husband, Patrick, who was at fault. He was a colleague at my workplace. He was in charge of my training when I was a newcomer, and at that time, I had a strong impression that he was a kind person. Gradually, we became closer, and our conversations outside of work increased. Our relationship deepened quickly as we started having lunch together and going out for meals after work.
I like you. Would you go out with me?
Our relationship began with his confession, and those times were still filled with happiness. He always gave me presents on anniversaries and bouquets on ordinary days. I often thought how happy I would be every day if I married him. I couldn't imagine a future without him, so when he proposed, I immediately said yes. But from there, difficult days began. Now, being away from Patrick, I am able to spend peaceful days. I still dream about those times occasionally, but I'm not as troubled or depressed as before. I believe all this is thanks to my parents' kindness. Because they were there, I was able to recover mentally to this extent. My father is 63 years old, retired, but still in good health, without any sign of slowing down.
Let me know if you need anything,
is his favorite saying, and he's been very reliable. My mother is a bit younger than my father, skilled in cooking, and has a bright personality. Though I sometimes take on the dinner preparation thinking I shouldn't always rely on her, I still can't match her cooking. Living at home has not only improved my mental health, but also my physical condition gradually. I still have a large burn scar on my face and I'm currently undergoing treatment. Compared to when I first got the injury, it has healed quite a bit. It took various experiences to reach this point in my life. It goes back to about 6 months after I married Patrick, 3 years ago.
Sorry, Cindy. Actually, I have a debt.
That fact came to light one day when he told me. After dinner, instead of our usual cheerful drinking and laughing while watching TV, he awkwardly spoke up. I gazed at his face, wondering if that's why he was slow with his fork that day. He stubbornly avoided eye contact, focusing intently on a corner of the table. Perhaps he thought it was better to come clean sooner or later since it would inevitably come out as we continued our married life. Because Patrick's income alone was not enough to repay the debt by himself, I had no choice but to help with the debt repayment. Even though we both worked, our household finances became unmanageable once living expenses and debt repayment overlapped. We gave up on spending money on hobbies and cut down on food expenses, but there was a limit to that. With no financial leeway left, we ended up living with Patrick's mother's house. I'm so happy that Patrick and Cindy are living with me. It's been lonely living alone since my husband passed away a few years ago. My mother-in-law, who had been living alone since losing her husband a few years ago, gave us a warm welcome. Seeing this, I felt relieved. I thought I wouldn't have to worry about being mistreated as a daughter-in-law. We should be able to live together harmoniously, all three of us. That was my naive thought, and I soon realized my mistake. My mother-in-law's acceptance of our living together was not just because she was lonely. She wanted a new source of income. She was vain and quite extravagant with money. You'll be laughed at by people around you if you use cheap stuff. You have to own at least 1 or 2 brand name items. She would come home with high-brand shopping bags, not just once or twice. And while she said one or two, there were numerous brand-name bags, wallets, and shoes in the house. Isn't it unnecessary to buy so many? Especially wallets and pouches. I think having one each is enough. I timidly tried to point this out. I wouldn't complain if all the purchases were made with her own money. The problem was that she kept asking me for money. I contributed to the household expenses for the three of us, and initially, my mother-in-law would withdraw money from her own account to buy luxury items. But presumably, her savings ran out. Eventually, she started asking me, "Cindy dear, could you lend me some money, please?" She says she would pay it back someday, but that never happened. I learned the hard way that the often heard promise of paying back money lent should not be trusted. I took on multiple part-time jobs to support our finances. Knowing my payday was approaching, my mother-in-law would start pressuring me. "Your salary is coming soon, right? Then lend me some money, will you?" Her demands became more intense day by day, and my spirit was gradually worn down. I was being cornered both financially and mentally. "Hey, can you please ask your mother not to waste money? It's tough for me to be asked to lend money over and over." Unable to bear it any longer, I decided to ask Patrick for help. I thought his mother would listen if her own son spoke up rather than his wife. However, his response was cold.
"It's not like you're being asked to lend money until you're out of savings, right? Then just listen to what my mom says."
Hearing that made my blood boil. His mother had never asked Patrick for money, only me. He could speak so indifferently because he wasn't the one being asked to lend money. Wait, I get it if it's about food or utilities, stuff that involves us both. But why do I have to pay for your mother's bags, jewelry, or decorative items? Isn't that ridiculous? Perhaps irritated by my rare rebuttal, Patrick also started to get agitated. Our argument escalated, and frustrated by the deadlock, he pushed me hard. Normally, I might have staggered a few steps and regained my balance, but perhaps due to consecutive days of work fatigue, I easily lost my balance and plunged headfirst into a nearby stove. "It's hot! It hurts!" I did the bare minimum first aid, like running cold water over it. Given my panicked and irrational behavior, even Patrick must have realized it was serious. Yet, he said dismissively,
"Shut up. It'll heal if you just cool it down,"
showing no concern at all. Having no choice, I called a taxi myself and hurried to the hospital. I received treatment from a specialist immediately, but I was left with a large burn scar on my face.
"How did this happen?"
When the doctor asked for the cause, Patrick, who had come along as a companion, awkwardly turned his face away. I lost my balance and fell, headfirst into the stove. I didn't say it was Patrick's fault, but as I spoke slowly, harboring deep anger and sadness inside, he conspicuously hung his head, perhaps aware of his guilt.
"Your injury is not my fault. You just dove in on your own."
Although Patrick hadn't said a word in the hospital, once we got home, he began to shout angrily.
"It's your carelessness." "What? Are you saying I did? There's no way I'm at fault."
He continued to insist over and over that he was not to blame, that it was my fault. I said nothing and just waited for the storm to pass. After about 30 minutes, Patrick finally stopped talking, but his irritation did not subside. Breathing heavily, he glared at me, trembling with rage. Then he began to violently open and close drawers in the room as if looking for something. He emerged with a large Boston bag slung over his shoulder.
"I can't live with a monster like you. I'm leaving."
With that, he left the house, deliberately making his footsteps heard. All I could do was watch his actions, mouth agape. "It's your fault Patrick left. What are you going to do about it?" My mother-in-law, who persistently demanded money and now blamed me, ignoring her own actions. I was not at fault in this situation. In fact, I was the victim. Sure, my words might have triggered the argument, but it all started because she demanded money and Patrick did nothing to stop her. Yet why am I the one being blamed so much? The verbal abuse from my mother-in-law continued for a week until Patrick returned, but he didn't come back because he had cooled down.
"Let's get a divorce. I'm returning a monster like you."
He presented me with divorce papers. Exhausted by the unreasonable treatment and verbal abuse, I decided to go back to my parents' house with those papers.
"What happened?"
"You're crying so much. And that burn." Seeing the two of them, I broke down and started crying like a child. My father patted my head, and my mother gently led me to the living room. I explained in detail what had happened at my in-laws' house, and about the verbal abuse from Patrick and his mother through my sobs. My dad's vein on his forehead was about to explode, and my mom's usually calm face turned into a scary look. Patrick said he's returning a monster like me.
Unforgivable. To say such things to our precious daughter.
My mother looked to my father for agreement.
Yes. Cindy, shall we make them regret this?
It was clear he was referring to Patrick and his mother. I nodded. What they had done to me was unforgivable. I refused to suffer in silence, bearing anger and regret. Upon confirming my decision, my father, using the skills he acquired during his active career, began to devise a plan.
Cindy, did he have a personal credit card?
No, we had a family one. With that answer, my father started by checking the card's history. Upon reviewing the online statements, he discovered something. Patrick has stayed at the same hotel outside the county several times in the past few months. He had also dined out multiple times before and after those stays. It might seem like just a trip or business travel. However, my father felt something was off and quickly found out the exact locations Patrick had visited, then left to go there himself. His agility was astonishing. A few days later, my father returned home with a somewhat triumphant look. In his hand was an envelope loaded with implications.
We got him. I've obtained plenty of evidence of his infidelity.
As he said this and opened the envelope, there lay a series of photos capturing Patrick in the act of cheating. It was unforgivable that he had been with other women while I struggled to earn money. Thanks to his professional skills in moving unnoticed, my father had managed to gather material to corner Patrick. I called him.
What do you want, monster? You still have something for me? You're not hoping for a reunion, are you?
His opening remarks left me dumbfounded. As if I would want that. What are you talking about? We haven't filed the divorce papers yet. Can you come over to my parents' house to talk about the divorce? I knew he would come, wanting to be rid of me as soon as possible. Sure enough, an hour after the call, the doorbell rang. As I opened the door to let him in, Patrick was catching his breath as if he had run here, desperate to be done with me.
Let's get straight to the point. You've been cheating for a while, haven't you? Planning to divorce before getting caught was your plan, right?
No sooner had Patrick sat down than my father launched into the heart of the matter, causing Patrick's breath to become even more erratic.
No, what are you talking about? I haven't done anything like that.
He stammered a denial, unable to look us in the eye when the conversation turned inconvenient, just like when he had disclosed his debt, staring at the corner of our dining table instead. Without missing a beat, my father began laying out the photos of Patrick's infidelity on the table. As the table filled up, Patrick's breathing quickened, betraying his panic.
These photos are fake. Someone must have set me up. Maybe they're edited? The evidence isn't just these photos. We've got videos too.
Patrick, not anticipating videos, widened his eyes in shock. We'll use this evidence to demand compensation from you. My firm statement seemed to be the last straw for him, and he left without a word. A few days later, Patrick returned to my parents' house, but this time he wasn't alone. He brought his mother with him. They incessantly rang the doorbell until I reluctantly cracked the door open, only for them to force their way in.
This is all your fault. You've ruined my life.
Exactly. We're going to sue you for damages. Their shouts filled the house, bombarding my eardrums with their incomprehensible logic. Why would they demand compensation from me? Despite the situation, I couldn't help but be puzzled, mirrored by my parents' baffled expressions. Patrick's affair partner turned out to be the daughter of the president of the company where he worked. My father, analyzing the photos and videos, had identified her and sent a demand for damages to the company. The company was thrown into chaos. The rumor of their affair spread quickly, and both were viewed with disdain. The president's daughter had been seen as a paragon of virtue, and the revelation of her affair, especially with a lowly employee, caused even greater uproar. The president, furious upon hearing the news, deemed their actions unacceptable. Given his disdain for misconduct, he fired both Patrick and his daughter. Patrick attempted to argue, but, already discredited by his debt, had no choice but to accept his fate. What enraged Patrick's mother wasn't his dismissal per se, but the loss of income it entailed adversely affecting her. She didn't just see me as a cash cow, but her son as well. I sighed in disbelief at her selfish nature.
It's all your fault. Now I have no money to spend.
She stomped her feet and flailed her hands, looking like nothing more than a child throwing a tantrum when things didn't go her way.
How dare you, being a monster?
What do you mean by calling her a monster?
My father intervened calmly. In her anger-impaired judgment, Patrick's mother answered every question she was asked.
Patrick pushed her, and that's how she fell face first into the stub. But it's not his fault, okay? She lost her balance all by herself.
My father managed to make her talk about the circumstances under which I got burned. He smiled smugly and stopped the recording on the recorder he had hidden on his back. Now we have all the evidence we need. We'll be claiming for the affair as well as the burns. That was all we needed to discuss that day. I told Patrick and his mother to leave our house. Patrick then suddenly changed his demeanor.
You! What are you recording, huh? Don't mess with me, you coward!
He yelled and lunged at me. His eyes bulging, teeth bared, he looked like a demon. His hand stretched out to grab my collar seemed to move in slow motion. The memory of our argument before I got burned flashed back. He had pushed me hard then too. Frozen with fear of being injured again, my legs wouldn't move. Just as Patrick's hand almost reached me, my father acted. With agility, bellying his age, he restrained Patrick. In no time, Patrick was face down on the floor, his arms secured by my father. It turns out my father had once been part of the police special forces. Always possessing a strong sense of justice and confidence in his physical strength, he made good use of it. Though retired, he never skipped his daily training, maintaining his muscle and often looking younger than his age.
Get off me, damn it! That hurts! That pain is nothing compared to what my daughter endured.
With a glare sharp as a bird of prey, my father stared down at Patrick struggling. The pain my father mentioned wasn't just the physical burns, but also the emotional torment inflicted by Patrick and his mother.
A man who can't protect his family doesn't deserve to be a husband. Stay away from my precious daughter forever.
With a stern voice, Patrick's resolve crumbled and his flailing ceased.
Cindy, call the police.
Okay, I will. The mention of the police made them twitch, but they didn't run. Silence fell as we awaited the police, a stark contrast to the earlier commotion. Soon officers arrived and took the now docile Patrick and his mother away.
Thank you for your cooperation.
After seeing my face, the officer looked at my father and saluted him. Thanks to the evidence my father gathered, I managed to get proper compensation from both Patrick and the president's daughter he had an affair with. They couldn't deny their actions with the evidence at hand. Furthermore, I received repayment for my burns from Patrick and all the money I had lent to his mother. They had no choice but to sell their luxury items to come up with the money. I was able to use that money for my burn treatments. While scars haven't completely disappeared, they're gradually fading. Patrick, still burdened with his previous debts, now has to work endlessly just to make ends meet. Patrick's mother, who had never worked while I was living at their house and spent her days going out, was now hustling just like Patrick because selling bags and accessories alone wasn't enough to cover her debts. I was surprised to see such a change in her, who used to dress up with lots of jewelry and now reportedly wears the same sweats every day.
Why'd I have to work this hard?
It can't be helped, right? We have debts to pay off.
They are said to be living in constant quarrels every day. I heard this through rumors, so I can't be sure if it's true. After all, I have completely cut ties with both of them. But just hearing about it, I can easily picture the scene. I'm living peaceful and happy days with my parents. To give back to them, I am planning to take them on a trip. Imagining their joyous faces, I couldn't help but smile.